Well, the Browns have themselves another quarterback, and it's a familiar face that fans know and love. Joe Flacco coming back to the Cleveland Browns on a one-year deal worth $4 million, according to Adam Schefter. That's the value of the deal there. Team has also confirmed that this move is happening and that he's coming back into the equation here. Megs, there's a number of tentacles that I think kind of stem off of this that we will get into. But obviously on the surface, just the idea of re-signing Joe Flacco, I think, is one that will go over well with Browns fans for the most part. He became a fan favorite in 2023 when he led them on that 5-game run, going 4-1, leading them to the playoffs. Obviously, the playoff game didn't go the way anybody expected, but a guy that fans became sort of infatuated with here returns in a situation where the Browns were kind of slim pickings when it comes to the quarterback position anyway, and they get a chance now to bring him back to Cleveland and likely be a mentor for some young quarterback that they take in the draft.
Yeah, no doubt. That's kind of where it lands for me, is that like the options that Cleveland has available to them or had available to them, they weren't great. Kirk Cousins, maybe Carson Wentz, Joe Flacco, and from there, it wasn't a great pool. And I think this option is the best of that group. I think, we're going to have a good conversation about what this means for the draft, what it means for the future, what it means for everything. But I do, all in all, think that them going with Flacco, not giving up a ton to go get Kirk Cousins, not trying to force something with Carson Wentz, I think is something that all Browns fans can get behind, and at least provide a little bit of excitement here as we're starting to get close to the draft next week, and then hopefully some more of these free agent signings.
Yeah, and you brought up a key name there in Cousins. I think that's the first thing after hearing that he signed and, what it means for the Browns quarterback room. Now you have two guys that are healthy, that are likely going to compete for the job with him and Kenny Pickett. But aside from that, the first thing that came to mind was, okay, this takes the Browns out of the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes, which has been the Browns have been linked to Kirk Cousins really since before the season ended. Like in December, there was reports and talks that the two sides could be interested in each other, mostly centered around the idea that that Cousins and Kevin Stefanski, obviously, he was his coach, his quarterback coach, and his offensive coordinator in Minnesota for a couple of years before Kevin Stefanski came to Cleveland, and so. This is where this kind of leads me next is, despite all the reports and rumors that the Browns would pursue something for Kirk Cousins, despite the fact that he was randomly in Cleveland a couple weeks ago, making the rounds at some local fast food chains, it feels like this kind of closes the door on that, at least for now, unless there's an injury situation later on and something changes. And so I just don't know that the Browns probably didn't want to play ball with the Falcons on trading draft capital. They probably don't like the price that the Falcons are sort of setting there. And so whether this kind of screws the Falcons and they're sort of stuck with Cousins for a year, making a very high amount of money is not their problem. But my initial reaction was that Cousins is likely off the table now, with Flacco now coming back to Cleveland.
Which I'm okay with, because we talked about it a little bit. A lot of the thing on Kirk Cousins is that he's really good indoors, right? I shouldn't say really good. In his prime, he was good indoors. He's not the best quarterback outdoors. And coming to the AFC North, especially the way it is now, you're going to have to be playing outdoor football, especially late in the season. He's very fragile. I don't think Joe Flacco is Iron Man by any means, but Kirk Cousins, coming off of that Achilles injuries, didn't look right and doesn't really do much outside of throwing on time and in the pocket. And when you're off, if he's having an off day, his bad is really bad. His good is good, but his bad is really bad. And we saw that, Joe Flacco, when he was on 2 years ago now, we have to remember that. It wasn't last season. It was 2 years ago that magical 5-game run. He was ripping that thing, but we're now going to be asking him to play a little bit more, in my opinion, in the 2025 season.
Yeah, no doubt. That is the next big question with Flacco, right? Is how much does he actually have left in the tank? 2 years now removed from his time in Cleveland initially, when he was playing at a high level. There's some familiarity with the offense, which matters. I think that is something that the Browns obviously put some stock in here when they went out and signed Flacco. They like the idea that he's played in the system, he knows what to expect, and he can go out there and certainly play in the offense, and that he's done some good things in this offense already. So there's a lot of positives that come with that. I also think though, and this was another place my head kind of went with this signing as we unpack all the different angles that kind of branch off of this. Like, we talked so much last year about the Browns not bringing Flacco back.
Yeah.
And why they were doing this. And there was a lot of said and reported about how they were trying to keep Deshaun Watson as comfortable as possible in the room, right? You bring Joe Flacco back, it's this lightning rod of a player that fans really rallied around and loved, versus Deshaun Watson, the controversial figure that you traded for that hasn't lived up to expectations. And it almost was going to create this extra pressure on a player that was already sort of crumbling under the pressure of trying to redeem himself, as he continues to try to do. So I think it's interesting that a year later, the Browns are kind of telling you like, hey, we're okay signing him now, but last year we were not okay signing him. And I think if you read the tea leaves here, it's kind of obvious why that was the case.
Yeah, very, very, very obvious. My mind went there as well, because I, naively enough, was a part of the group that was like, no way that they didn't sign him because of, to keep Deshaun happy. But it's very clear now, like it is 100% that was the case. And the another good thing that I'm taking away from this too, Spence, is that Kevin Stefanski's getting getting a guy that he wants, right? That he's now spent a couple years, a couple wasted seasons trying to form an offense around a quarterback that maybe wasn't his offense. And when we've seen him have a guy that can play under center, play off play action, be accurate when he's supposed to be on time, be making making the right decisions, right? That comes back to what he said a couple weeks ago. Our quarterback's going to be a good decision maker. Like, this is Kevin Stefanski, in my opinion, saying, Andrew, here's my guys, go get one of them. And they went with Joe Flacco. I'm excited about it. I think a concern you brought up a couple weeks ago is very valid. Like, if this goes poorly, 2023
how is he going to be remembered?
Is going to be forgotten about.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Listen, ultimately, like the organization can't make decisions based off of that. Like, well, tarnish Joe Flacco's image here in Cleveland. So if they think this is the right move, that's fine. Back to the Deshaun thing real quick. I do think there's not that anybody should care about his feelings at this point. Like, I think we're beyond that point. But the quarterback that continues to feel like he has to respond to everything. I mean, he just posted a video this week sort of responding to people saying that he might not ever play again. And he's talking about how he's going to be better than before and all these different things. I can only imagine, like, this has to feel like another, like, just hit coming his way. Like, he's already hearing so many different things. And now he's going to have to spend a year basically not playing and listening to, especially if Joe Flacco plays well, how much this fan base adores this other quarterback that's on the roster again. Like, it's the exact thing that they tried to avoid last year. Now they don't care anymore because he's not going to play anyway, and they just kind of do what's best for the organization. But I do kind of find it interesting that, like, Deshaun Watson has obviously had a lot of, some of it his own doing, but a lot of adverse situations to deal with. Mm-hmm. And he's had to hear a lot of different things here in Cleveland, and it's not going to get any easier for him this year while he just kind of sits on the bench and can do nothing about it, dealing with an injury situation. Again, not saying anybody should feel badly. I think we're beyond that point, but I just kind of found that interesting as well, that like a year later, this is now going to be a major part of the conversation around Deshaun for the rest of the for the entire 2025 season.
What a hell of a 1-2 punch, right? You get the owner saying that they made a mistake last week, and then
a big swing and a miss. Yeah.
They come back with the right hook to finish it off with, "Hey, here's Joe Flacco."
I mean, look, from everything we've heard, like, he doesn't have a problem with Joe Flacco. They got along when he was kind of around the team late in 2023, and when Flacco was kind of leading that surge. But it can't feel good from his perspective that, like, more things just kind of keep piling on him. But I guess that would have been the case, like, if the Browns take a quarterback anyway in the draft and they feel like that's their franchise guy. Well, and that's the other part of this too, Megs, to kind of put a bow on this conversation for now. I don't know that this alters their plans massively at 2. I'm sure they already kind of have an idea what they want to do. But bringing Flacco back does make it seem like Shedeur Sanders might still be in play at 2, because this is a total move to, hey, let's get a guy in here, be our bridge, be sort of our mentor to a young guy, and then we can pass the torch to the guy that we think is the franchise quarterback at a later date. And if that's Shedeur Sanders, then they maybe take him at 2 and kind of bridge the gap that way.
They certainly could. The way I kind of see it is, hey, this is move so you don't have to force something at number 2. Like, let's just say there's a couple scenarios that could come out. Like, maybe Travis Hunter does go. Let's say Travis Hunter goes 1 to Tennessee. They shock the world. They take him with the number 1 pick, and you got Cam Ward available. That's obviously a pick that you want. But if you don't have Shedeur graded high enough to take him at 2, you feel like you have a guy who can be a bridge, be a Band-Aid quarterback for some time, and that frees you up to try to go get a guy like a Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter or whomever it may be. In my opinion, obviously you can tell who made the graphics today. Here's a Travis Hunter at number 2.
You're pointing the wrong direction. You got to point the other way when you do that.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so we'll see where it all shakes out. But I do think that, this is a good move in either scenario. If they do go and get a guy at 2, awesome. That means Joe Flacco's on board to, hey, you're coming in here, you're going to play a little bit, you're going to mentor this young kid and get him right, or they go with a skill guy and try to make something happen.
Yeah, listen, I think Flacco just did that in Indy, right? Like he was doing that for Anthony Richardson. Maybe he does that idea, but if this is the route they're going, then I guess he'd have no choice. I still ultimately think to sort of reference the main topic here that we want to get into with the number 2 pick, I still think Travis Hunter's probably the route they're going to go. And a lot of this just kind of centers around, I've heard Albert Breer talk about this, like the grades on players like starting at like player like 4 or 5 through like 40. All those grades aren't like so varying that like you're getting like, you're going to get good value on those guys like later on anyway. But like the 2 guys at the top of this draft, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, stand out among the entire rest of this group so much that you're better off like taking one of those guys that could be an impactful franchise-changing player and sort of knowing you're in a good spot and then worry about the quarterback position later in a year where the quarterback class isn't quite as good as other years. So it still feels like Travis Hunter is going to be the pick, and I'm okay with that. I think Jimmy Haslam's comments last week, I think, changed things for me quite a bit because I was still under the impression of like they got to get the quarterback right, and they botched the Deshaun thing, and I do think I've kind of been under the impression that they do like Shedeur, and so because they like Shedeur, it feels like they would be willing to take him at 2, but I also understand where if Jimmy Haslam is saying we're not going to force the issue at quarterback, it almost indicating Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are going to have some time to kind of get this thing figured out. Mm-hmm. That suggests to me that they might wait on the quarterback and see if maybe Shedeur does fall and they get a chance to get him. We'll talk about that here coming up. But like that they'll wait on the quarterback. They'll prioritize a different position at 2. And if you're deciding between Hunter and Carter for me, here's what it comes down to for me, Migs. I don't know, like the word generational or the phrase generational talent gets thrown around too much these days. Yeah. I don't know that either. I don't know that anybody in this class I consider like generational, but I think Hunter is closer to that than what Abdul Carter is, just maybe even slightly. And part of that is because he can play both ways. He can do so much. His athleticism is on full display. But I think like if you're deciding between the 2, he has a little bit more of an edge to him that makes me think he could be generational, and he feels a bigger need for the Browns if they really view him as a wide receiver than what Abdul Carter does.
Spencer, that's it for me. Like where Cleveland's at right now, it's like, okay, you get Abdul Carter, and like the joke is that, hey, we're going to be on a fall Sunday, and you're going to look at a stat line that has Myles Garrett with 3 sacks, Abdul Carter with 2.5, and a pass batted down, and then the Browns lose 10-6, right? Like it's like these guys can do. He's a great player. He's an awesome player. Would fit really, really well. I do think that the Browns defensive line, especially at the edge, like we can't forget about Alex Wright, Owusu-Koramoah, like some of these guys that are still available or still there in Cleveland are still very good. They may not be as good. They may not have the ceiling that Abdul has. The flip side of that is you get a guy like Travis Hunter who can pair with Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy can't be a guy who gets a million targets again, and it's not going to be the case. But you get Cedric Tillman on one side, you get Jerry on the other, and then you get Travis running around in the slot, and you're like, okay, this offense has some tools here where you can start to score some points. Like you can start to see it, and you get Travis Hunter for a long time coming out of it. I think that he can be a guy who can be a game-changing type cat, like a Jamar Chase is down in Cincinnati. Maybe not to that maybe not to that caliber, but something like that where you see their impact almost immediately, and they can always at any point in the time change the flow of a game.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny because like early on in this process, after Andrew Berry said they viewed Travis Hunter as a wide receiver, I was like, well, there's no. I kind of took it out of the equation. I was like, there's no way they're taking a receiver at number 2 when they don't have a quarterback. But again, the Jimmy Haslam comments I think changed things. And if they're going to go best player available, to me, that's Hunter. Even though I think Carter has a chance to be really really good as well, I like Hunter a little bit more. I don't know, and I could be totally wrong in this. This isn't me reporting anything. I know there was a report that came out yesterday that Carter's, the stress reaction in his foot is healing or whatever, and it's not a concern. I'm still just I am dreading the idea that they draft him or some team drafts him, and then like after rookie minicamp, there's like a report that he's going to have the surgery, and then it's just like, well, what was the point of this? So I'd rather stay away from that, but that's just me. Speaking of what they'll do at number 2, though, and potential pursuits of quarterbacks. There is a world, Megs, where they pass on Shedeur Sanders, take Travis Hunter, and then potentially try to trade up and get Shedeur Sanders at a different point. The key thing here is number 9, the Saints at number 9. If the Saints pass on Shedeur Sanders, because it sounds like the Giants are leaning towards taking whichever of Carter and Hunter is not taken at 3. If he makes it past 9, it feels like all bets are off in terms of who is going to take Shedeur Sanders. Teams maybe trading back up to try to get him. And the Browns could certainly do that, having the first pick of the second round, make a move into even the teens to try to get him. Now, it's going to cost you a lot. And I do think after the Saints, the team that you have to try to get in front of is going to be actually your biggest rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, ironically enough, at 21. So this sets up an interesting situation. I don't know if my biggest thing I keep going back to is Andrew Berry doesn't trade up often. He's done it basically one time for JOK. But JOK was the right player to do it for. So if they think Shedeur Sanders is the right player to do it for, then I guess I could see them doing it. And listen, I wouldn't hate it. I would love the idea of bringing in both these Colorado guys who already have the chemistry together and who obviously helped turn that program around and keeping them together at the NFL level and seeing what it does for you. You can't go wrong with it, in my opinion.
No, I think you're dead right. And the thing that stands out to me is that just this would be uncharacteristic of what Andrew Berry likes to do because you'd have to package a lot. It's almost as expensive, not quite as expensive as taking him at number 2 because that's a high quality pick. You spend that 33 pick, right? That's still considered an elite value pick, right? Anything in the top 100 is a great value pick. You're gonna trade that one to go up a little bit higher, but you're also gonna have to package maybe next year's 2, or there's gonna be some kind of a package where you put together some really valuable picks. And whether you agree with it or not, I do think it's on the table. But I would be surprised. I would be surprised if they, kind of opened up the checkbook, if you will, and really paid to get back up. But I tend to agree with it. This is a players' league. Like I don't care about. I personally, as a viewer of the game, know that touchdowns don't equate to draft pick. Right? Like it's like we're trying to do this to win football games, not to continue to acquire draft picks. So it would be very expensive. I don't know if I see Andrew Berry doing it. I would fall in the camp though with you that I would love it if they did.
Yeah, I would love it. I think here's the thing. There has to be like a sweet spot that would make sense for them to do it. You could get to 20. I think people look at the draft trade value charts that like chart out like what each pick is sort of worth, and they use it as gospel. I think people have to realize that like it's never. And like most of these trades, especially up in the first round, are never like apples to apples, like balancing. Like I think the number 1 overall pick, for example, is worth like 3,000 points is what it's considered. And then number 2 is like 2,500 points or something like that. And so just theoretically, like if the Browns are going to trade up from 2 to 1, like we had talked about at one point this offseason, everyone just goes and they're like, all right, well, they got 2,500 with the second pick. They just need to find 2 picks to sort of pair together to get you the extra 500 so it bounces out to 3,000. Guys, it never, ever equals out to like the trade being completely even in terms of value. These teams that trade up, especially to number 1, almost always overpay by like almost double of what that pick is worth. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that to get to 20, but it's going to cost more than what you think. It's not just going to be like, well, hey, because I think the Broncos draft 20th. Just throw the Broncos 33 and like 104, and that should get the job done. Like, no. You'll probably have to give up at least one of your third rounders this year. You might have to give up like a future second because the Broncos are going to know you're trading up for a quarterback, and they can sort of hold you hostage in that way. Like people need to understand that like the values never are like even. It's never a complete 50-50. Like, hey, this trade's perfectly fair for everybody. Like you almost always have to overpay to get there. And that's another part of this conversation too, Megs, is like if the Browns are so inclined, like if they're trying to trade up from like 33 to like just outside the teens, like if they, to me, if they trade up from 33 to 15 or something like that, that tells me that you should just take in Shedeur Sanders at 2.
At 2, right?
If you think he's that valuable that you're willing to do that and give up more, like overpay now to get him at 15, you should have just taken him at 2 if you had him in your, and if he was graded in like your top 15, you know how important the quarterback position is. You might as well just take him at 2.
Because at 33, then you could get a guy like, let's say, Luther Burden, who can't play defense, but can play offense, maybe not quite to Travis Hunter's level.
Maybe Emeka Egbuka if he falls.
Right, Emeka Egbuka. Like there's guys there that you could just kind of flip it and do that without having to give up. When I say that, like that's more characteristic of Andrew Berry. Like, hey, we're gonna lower the value. Like our most valuable position is quarterback. We're gonna address it, and then hey, we'll sacrifice a little bit with not getting Travis Hunter, and we'll supplement him with Emeka Egbuka, one of the best receivers in all of college football last year. You know, I think that is more a viable route than the other way.
Now, I will say, if they go Travis Hunter at 2, and then they decide we want a quarterback with our second pick, whether it's Shedeur Sanders and you're trading up higher, or whether he falls into the late 20s, then like, okay, do it. And I also think like that's in the cards anyway for this Browns team, because having that 5th-year option, especially for a quarterback that you think can develop into something, is so valuable. So even if it's not Shedeur Sanders, even if God forbid, because I don't necessarily think he's the best fit for the Browns, but even if it's Jalen Milroe and you were going to take him at 33, it's okay to trade up or back into the first round at like 30 and take Jalen Milroe there, because you get the 5th-year option, and that's going to cost you significantly less because you're only moving up a couple picks. You know, you might only have to give up like 104 and something small, another couple picks to get there. So it's a little bit easier to navigate like a jump 3 or 4 picks up versus like all the way to like 20, which is like 13 picks up. So that's the sort of difference there. But yeah, I guess like obviously if Shedeur falls into the 20s, then now we're talking. If he doesn't and you still want a quarterback, I still think trading up is in the cards, because getting that 5th-year option is important.
Yeah, and if it's not, like let's say Shedeur's not there and Pittsburgh takes him at 21, and then
by the way, can you imagine if Pittsburgh takes him and then he like haunts the Browns for years?
Well, but that's what's going to happen. That's just exactly what's going to happen.
That'd be such a Browns thing to happen.
It's such a Browns thing. Like, yeah, of course. But then you're now looking at round 3, round 4. One of those guys, right? That's where you're looking to address the quarterback situation. I think it's too important to get it right. And the argument that, hey, next year's class is good is, yeah, it's true, but it also means you're going to be picking in the top 10 again. And I think that's somewhere that you want to be. And while Shedeur may not be the best prospect available over the last 3 drafts and into next year, okay, he's where you're at when you need one, and I think that it's too important to address that with a young guy after what happened today with getting Joe Flacco. For
what it's worth, I've already had a question written down for weeks to ask Andrew Berry at his press conference next week, his pre-draft press conference, just about how the future quarterback class, like the 2026 class, or like it doesn't even have to be 2026, just like every year, how the next class of quarterbacks plays into their conversations they have about the quarterbacks in the current class. So I don't know if he'll give me a good answer or not. He rarely does, but I'd like to get a sense of just like how they evaluate that, how they treat that when they have these conversations. So we'll see what he says, and I look forward to asking him that. But moving from the draft conversation to some veterans that still remain out in the open market that the Browns could have some interest in, or have some interest really in bringing back. This topic sort of came from Gura he was on the Ken Carman show with Anthony Lima here in Cleveland. And he brought up like he'd re-sign Chubb, he'd re-sign Moore, he'd re-sign Jedrick Wills, and just bring back these guys and see what kind of sticks and give it a shot, because the Browns are obviously bargain barrel shopping at a lot of these positions right now. For what it's worth, he also did mention Joe Flacco being re-signed, and that's something that just came to fruition. So maybe he's onto something here, and all these guys will be re-signed. But I think it's kind of interesting for us to kind of go person by person here, Megs, and sort of evaluate what we think about the Browns bringing back any or all of these players. Chubb is the obvious one. I think everybody's okay with him coming back on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Chubb for sure is the guy that I'm hopeful. Like, hey, we announced Flacco, and then like I'm hopeful in like a couple hours they're going to announce Chubb. Like that would just get all of the Browns, like all Browns Nation, all fired up. I think he's the obvious one because like it's not going to cost a lot. Bring him back, even if it's just goodwill. Like everyone knows the situation. He's not old Nick Chubb, but having him on the Cleveland Browns makes the whole thing go.
Well, and especially here's the thing: like the NFL is so running back by committee these days. If you draft a guy, which I'm assuming the Browns are going to draft a guy, you put yourself in a situation where Chubb can sort of be like him and this rookie running back can sort of split the reps, right? Like they can sort of be the two guys in this running back by committee system. And that's a pretty good 1-2 punch to have. Even if you get like 80% of the old Chubb, like he's still going to be a pretty good running back for you. And you can feel pretty good about that. I'm okay. Obviously I'm good with Chubb coming back. I'll also say of this trio, I'd be okay if the Browns re-signed Elijah Moore as well. I know Elijah Moore isn't a name that like pops off the page. People don't get like excited about Elijah Moore. He's never done anything like incredible here in Cleveland. But I will say, like bringing Flacco back, him and Flacco have chemistry, man. And he had some of his best games when Flacco was ironic. Several players had a lot of their best games when Flacco was under center, which is interesting, obviously. But I digress on that. But yeah, like, you know, he put up like 600 yards kind of regularly. He didn't score a lot of touchdowns, but we saw on the tape, like go back and watch the tape. He gets open. He's out there able to make plays. It's just about who's throwing the ball a lot of the time. And so I think a lot of it is circumstantial in that way. But yeah, like I'm okay with Elijah Moore if they were to bring him back for the simple fact that like this team needs receivers. They need depth at that position. Yeah. And I think like if you're looking for, you know, third and fourth options, he's a fine one to sort of throw into the mix there and just see what he brings to the table next year. And if he can compete for another role on this team the way he has the last 2 years.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. In 2023, his best games were with Joe Flacco. He had 83 yards against the Rams, 61 yards in that game, in that clinching game against the New York Jets. And you remember that all came in the first half when he got that nasty concussion. That was really scary. And then last year, when Jameis Winston was in, he had that 111-yard game against Denver. Obviously got overshadowed by Jerry Jeudy's 290 yards, or whatever it was. 290. So that gets overshadowed. So he's got that in him, but would be a nice piece to if that group can stay healthy. Like he is a really, really good slot receiver. He just needs a consistent quarterback throwing him the football. He's had like 7 of them since he's been in Cleveland for 2 years.
Yeah, again, I'm not trying to say Elijah Moore is going to be some massively impactful player that you're bringing back and like, oh, he fixes the offense. But I like the idea of like as a depth of piece, as another guy, a rotational guy in that room. I'm okay with that. Now, Wills is the interesting one because he did throw out Jet Wills' name, and that's always going to spark some controversy. I understand where Nathan was coming from when he floated this. The idea was like you can never have too many offensive linemen, right? We've seen the injuries this team has dealt with on the offensive line the last couple of years. It hasn't been pretty. And so if you have another depth piece, a guy that knows what you're trying offensively, is familiar with the culture, all those things, it doesn't hurt. But I push back on Wills for a number of reasons, some more obvious than others. But also, like, I'm sitting here telling you to re-sign these guys from a 3-win team. You can't bring back everybody from a 3-win team. And I think Wills kind of is the epitome of why this team struggled last year. Like, the effort isn't there in certain moments and plays. You see that on the tape all the time. Like I'm not saying he's the reason they only got 3 wins, but certainly like he sort of sums up some of the problems that the Browns had last year as to why this team wasn't very good. And I don't know. I can't wrap my head around them bringing him back next year, even though they have a guy as their offensive line coach who obviously is kind of a disciple of Bill Callahan.
Well, and the market's kind of telling you a lot of that story, right? Former first-round pick, 10th overall pick, right? High draft pick. Crickets, right? Crickets in his free agency. Nobody's even talked about him. He hasn't been on any visits. Nothing's been reported about Jedrick Wills. And I think the market's telling you, like, hey, this is what the league thinks of this player. If you get him back for super cheap, sure. But I don't think that, in my opinion, he would be a guy that I wouldn't bring back. Just reset those positions up front, and get some fresh faces in there.
Yeah, and there's something to be said too for, just like you said, fresh start. I think with all these guys, the market's telling you there's not a big, war for them. So you could probably bring them all back if you really wanted to. And that's how the Browns have to do business right now because they don't have a lot of money. They'd all be sort of prove it deals for all these guys. Mm-hmm. But I can't bring every single person back. Really quickly here. I know we're like very low on time. I want to do we're going to start doing like a pull a topic from a hat thing. I got a bowl here. I'm looking through them. We'll do like a minute on this real quick, Megs. The topic is, this is a good one because we talked about the quarterback situation. If the Browns pass on Sanders or they don't end up with Shedeur Sanders, I guess, what quarterback do you want them to draft and where?
All right. Might be a prisoner of the moment, but after watching the John Gruden QB camp with Will Howard.
I knew you were going to go there. I knew it.
Like, holy, this is my guy. I want to go to war with this type of a guy. There's some questions about Will Howard, but I do think that his size is really, I mean, he's huge. He's a big dude. He's the same exact size as Josh Allen was. They compared it apples to apples, 6'3", 247 or something like that. And they're the same size. There's some accuracy question marks, I think, with Will. You got to take into account that he was throwing to the best receivers ever in college football last year, so that certainly helps things. But I would be interested to see what Will Howard would be like at the NFL level.
On another platform, I sort of ranked the quarterbacks, and it was Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. I actually put Ward third as like the guys that I would take because I'm intrigued so much by his leadership and some of the things that he did. Like of all these guys you're talking about, like what they did on certain stages, like he performed his best at the most crucial time of the year. So I really like Will Howard. I'll say this though, my answer will be Tyler Shuck. He's kind of risen up the board for me. The biggest thing with him is his age, right? He has less room to develop because he's already 25. But there's something intriguing about like if you get him, you give it a shot, and if it doesn't work out, like everyone would understand, like he was just a little too old in his sort of developmental process, and he's not going to develop anymore. I think there's less like pressure, but there's less pressure for somebody like that because he's already at a certain stage of his career. I also think there's less pressure on the Browns to like turn him into something. Like he kind of is what he is. So if it doesn't work out, I don't think people are as mad about it. So I kind of like the idea of Tyler Shuck. I think he's one of the more refined products in this class in general, even though he's probably not going to like maybe the second, but probably the third round, I would say, is where he probably goes off the board.
It would give you, it's a guy who you can compare like literally apples to Kenny Pickett. Like they're the same age, and you're like, hey,
that's fair.
You have him graded higher than him. Like that's one way to look at it. The other thing that Tyler Shuck conversation brought up, I was listening to something somewhere, was
Brandon
Can
Weeden.
You believe they drafted Brandon Weeden?
Oh yeah, okay.
28. Like, are you kidding me?
I get that being a worrisome thing.
But he's 25. But Brandon Weeden was 28 years old.
That's true.
That's true. That is crazy.
I mean, there's something to be said for that, and that could be true. It's why you don't like drafting quarterbacks that are older, but for a team that like is trying to sort of get this position right, it doesn't hurt to just take a shot on a guy who maybe is a little further along in his process. So we'll see. But all right, it was a fun show. We appreciate you guys stopping by. Make sure you subscribe to the Cleveland Browns on SI YouTube channel and head on over to si.com/NFL/Browns. We'll have a ton of stuff over there for you today on Joe Flacco, what this means, all that stuff. So a lot of good content coming your way here with the Cleveland Browns and SI. Keep on getting your news from us. What's that, Megs?
One thing. I'm going to link all of our old Flacco videos in the description below. So if you're here, first of all, thanks for hanging with us the whole show. I'm going to link all of our old Flacco stuff to jump in there and watch some of those old games.
Check all that out as well, and keep on following along with all things Cleveland Browns with the Cleveland Browns on SI.